This week, I'm going to talk about how attorneys compensate themselves. It's something you really should know as a legal bookkeeper and if you work with law firms. So, understanding the intricacies of attorney compensation is crucial when working with law firms, especially the ones that are looking to grow. A well-structured compensation package can significantly impact the firm's ability to attract and retain the top legal talent. And here is where, as a bookkeeper, we can shine if we understand the compensation methods and at least have a basic understanding. I can tell you from my experience that as I work with the lawyers, they all say it's a simple compensation package, and then you find out it's not quite that what you think it's going to be. Basically, I'm going to tell you the three most common ones, but there's a lot more. And most of them, when I've met with the lawyers, they're keeping it on a side spreadsheet, which doesn't always correlate to the actual data inside of QuickBooks. And then we also run into some other problems along the way where they start to tweak it and they adjust it and they make changes in it that aren't the typical norm. And then it's all of a sudden it's something that really has to be in a spreadsheet because none of the other programs for reporting can be flexible enough to compensate for, like, just for example, that this one attorney out of the group of attorneys is getting reimbursed for Blue Cross, so we have to offset that. And yeah, these are things that they do. So, and they tie it all into their compensation package, which makes it very complex and difficult to manage. So the first one is probably the oldest method. And if you've ever heard of a lawyer that worked at a big law firm, they're trying to work their way up the corporate ladder. It's called the tenure or seniority method. It's one of the more traditional compensation methods, and it rewards attorneys that have had longevity and dedication to a firm. Historically, this model has worked well, as attorneys who stayed long enough to eventually become partners will do really well if you hang in there and just stay at the firm. But as you know, the younger generation doesn't stay in a job for very long. So this one's kind of aged its way out. The rise of Generation X and the millennials have definitely shifted the expectations in a law firm. A lot of them don't want to do all the work and not be compensated for it, which is kind of how this model sits. Most of the attorneys there want immediate recognition for their contributions, and they don't want to wait years and years and years to be formally compensated for their work. So as a bookkeeper, it's essential to understand the financial implications of this model. While the model encourages loyalty, it may also need to align with the aspirations of the newer generation. So that can lead to turnover. So you might find attorneys will come and go because they don't want to wait out the time. And you really need to ensure that the compensation records are accurate and reflect the tenure. And you have to consider the potential shifts in the compensation strategy to retain the younger talent. So you might have to take this method and turn it into a hybrid method to work. And you can work with your attorney partners to make this work. So then there's another one called the Originator and the Rainmaker model. And this one is where I'm sure you've heard Rainmaker if you've worked with law firms for a while. That term comes up. It's the person who brings the work in. So the Rainmaker model prioritizes the attorneys who bring in new clients or cases, and it rewards them with a percentage of the revenue generated on the case or matter. So these attorneys are bringing them in, but they're actually not doing the work for the case or matter. This method can drive significant income for the firm as it's structured around the roles of the finder, minder, and grinder. And if you've ever heard those, that's more terms that you might want to learn. The finder is usually the rainmaker. They're bringing the work in, they're finding the new work, they're bringing it in. The minder just maintains the client relationship, and the grinder is doing all the grunt work. It's doing the substantial legal work. So from a bookkeeper's perspective, tracking revenue that's attributed to these individuals is essential. And this is where your programs like Lean Law and Clio will help you. They usually have a method to track the originator, to track the responsible attorney. You'll see that as a term. This model may create disparities in the compensation, so it's vital to maintain transparency in the financial records. Always ensure that the figures in the attorney's billing software will match Clio and Xero, and Clio and QuickBooks, or Clio and Xero, they match. We don't want to have numbers in one program and then numbers in another. This is why you want to connect the two. Making sure that your accounts receivable is accurate, it matches and aligns with Clio, for example. Making sure the revenue aligns with what came into QuickBooks. Remember, the bank is the source of truth. And sometimes these figures can go awry for various reasons, but I won't get into in this video, but you want to run those reports inside of Clio and then compare them to QuickBooks or Xero and see if they're accurate. I mean, attorneys like to put stuff into Clio and has nothing to do with, like, it never came into the bank. So we want to make sure that they're correct. So one of the newer models that you might see is going to focus on client-centric or future-ready models. So modern law firms are increasingly adopting this client-centric approach. The client part, the whole client experience is pivotal. They want to emphasize excellent client service. It's key to the success of the law firm. So as a bookkeeper, your role might involve maybe advising on compensation strategies that reward the attorneys that enhance the client experience, but you also have to measure the client experience. So remember that. And it's maintaining really strong client relationships, which is important. They might lead into more referrals, for example. So this model aligns compensation with client outcomes, and it will foster a service-oriented culture. Overall, this is a win for the clients. It's also a win for the law firm. So this is actually more new or modern one, but it's one I'm seeing more and more, that they're disposing of this old school tenure one and moving towards this model where the client relationship is the most important thing. And so that is something you want to look at. And it's also something that you want to effectively manage. You want to effectively manage the financial records to make sure that they match the billing software. And you want to make sure that the client experience overall is premier. And that might be assisting your attorney client with setting up some metrics to track that. I hope this is helpful. These compensation models are intricate. You really want to take a look at them. They're most likely on a spreadsheet somewhere, and then make sure they tie back to the books. That's number one. Make sure all the data ties back to the books. And then take a look at what they're doing, and maybe you can align it with that. Maybe you can make it so that these compensation packages and plans are not only tied to QuickBooks, but tied to the billing software. And maybe use a product like LiveFlow, where you can automate this entire process and make it easier on yourself, make it easier on for your client to get the data more quickly. There is some other products. There's another company called My Firm Data that works with Clio. So if you have Clio clients, you might want to look towards that. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know. This is complicated. If you have an oddball one you want to discuss, please reach out to me, Facebook or wherever, and we'll see you all next week. Bye now.